Hello everyone, this is Akal, and today I'm going to talk about sexual transmutation. I call this the ultimate sexual energy transmutation practice. This practice, essentially what we're attempting to do is to transform the base energies of the body into higher functioning energies. So meaning base energies would be sort of like the energies that are more associated with sexual reproduction, pleasure seeking, have to do with digestion, all sorts of other sorts of processes. But what we're going to focus on is the sexual energy specifically. And again, keep in mind that this energy is not separate from any other form of energy. I call something sexual energy only because it's the same vitalizing life force that moves through our entire being, but in this particular case, it's simply moving through the sexual chakra. I hope that makes a little sense. So the Chinese, or the Taoists, they would refer to this as the transformation of Jing, which is raw sexual energy, into Qi, which is subtle energy, to Shen, which is spirit. So again, this is gradual pressurizing upward. Now, I use this term pressurized because in terms of the experience of these practices, essentially that's what we're doing, is we're creating an internal hydraulics or an internal pressure. This internal pressure, and there's a lot of little details to this that I'll get into in a moment, but this internal pressure eventually begins to build and build and build and build and build and build. And as it's building, we start to break down our little controls, our little controls or our little unconscious aspects of our personality. Now, one of the things I should say that is if you're doing any of these kinds of practices, whether it's what I'm going to teach you or any other sort of sexual transmutation practice, the assumption here is that you're meditating. Again, because without the cultivation of awareness, most of this stuff is just kind of like going through the motions. Because what you end up doing when you start to work with these kinds of practices, yoga, tantra, any sort of practice that's dealing with human energetics, what you're doing, or rather what you're opening the door to, is anything that you've been holding on to that's like, let's say, patterns of behavior or unconscious, traumas and things of that nature. These things will start to percolate to the surface. So it can kind of throw you off. The other thing that happens is if you have repressed sexual energy, that will start to come to the surface as well, which could drive you a little bit stir crazy. And so when I say stir crazy, what I kind of mean is you're just perpetually horny. You may have your imagination fills full of kinky ideas. A number of things could possibly occur if you have repressed sexual energy and then you start doing these kinds of practices. So you have to be prepared for these sorts of things to occur. I've had a lot of really odd experiences in my lifetime when I first started to really cultivate sexual energy and I stopped wasting it as much as I was through masturbation or ejaculation during sex, whatever it was. When I stopped wasting it, I started to have more visions and more profound, connections with more sort of subtle realities. But through all this energy becoming activated, I also became tremendously horny. And it was unbearable at times. And so there are times where, I would have to all right, I need to ejaculate just to bring the energy back down. And then I would have to start new again with my abstinence. So one of the prerequisites for doing this kind of work is the abstinence from ejaculation. The reason you need to abstain in order to get something out of these practices is because an ejaculation is a release. It's a release of that pressure that we're actually attempting to cultivate. So we want to have a high sexual charge. We want to get comfortable being horny. We want to also recognize that horny, the same feeling that is horny, which most of us run around desperately trying to release, is also the very same energy that is very vitalizing and very enriching. So Other words, your sexual energy isn't just sexual. It's your immune system, it's your digestion, it's your heart center, it's your third eye, it's your visions, it's your cognitive abilities. It's all connected. There is nothing separate. So the first thing you need to do, step number 1, is stop ejaculating. I generally suggest that you start off, you go one day at a time, but you want to build up to a week initially. And then you want to build to a month. And then you want to build to, again, you get the idea, you want to gradually get more and more comfortable. So a lot of hard chargers out there might go 0 to 60 and say, I'm not going to ejaculate for 3 months. Good luck. That's really challenging, particularly if your habit or your pattern historically has been to ejaculate every day. Now, the benefits of all these practices that I'm going to tell you about, really what you're doing is you're sharpening all those things that I told you about earlier that your sexual energy is connected to: your immune system, your digestion, your cognitive thinking. Again, if you want access to woo-woo, to visions, etc., retaining your sexual energy will lead to those things. However, you have to have these other practices involved at the same time. It's not simply abstaining from ejaculation is going to do anything. If abstaining from ejaculation is great, but the energy is still settled at your base. There's no pressurizing up. So you need practices in order to pressurize it up. The practices, what they do is we're utilizing your musculature, so your internal musculature, and we're also utilizing the breath. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through a progression. This is the breath part of the progression. There's also some physical exercises I'm going to show you after these. But the breath part of this progression, I don't know how that, one thing I should say though is that it helps to create little contractions. So now what I mean by that is, the idea here is anywhere you put your energy in your body, or rather, anywhere you place your awareness in the body, energy flows to that point. So if I concentrate really intensely on my third eye point, energy will go to that third eye point. And eventually this will start to feel really solid, kind of like a brick. I've had these experiences. Many people have these experiences. However, one of the things that helps me intensify my concentration and seemingly the flow of energy is to create a very slight contraction. And what I mean by that, let's say I'm once again concentrating on my third eye point. If I furrow my brow very slightly and I create the sensation like I'm pulling on the third eye point, that will actually further increase the flow of energy to that space. So the breath practice I'm going to teach you, it always begins with, first thing, one is you got to get the mind connected back into the body, into the physical form. So first thing what you do is you're going to create that slight contraction on the third eye point, right between the brow, and you're going to inhale. And so you're going to create that contraction, inhaling, and it's as if you're pulling energy down to below the navel. Once you have your energy pulled down below the navel, you're going to lift up your pelvic floor. And again, the perineum is key here. So the perineum is essentially, I like to think about it like a laser pointer. It's, I won't go into too many details and too much woo-woo about it, but the perineum is kind of like a laser pointer. So if I lift up my perineum after I've inhaled through the third eye point, went down to below the navel, I lift up my perineum, it's directing energy to that point. So now the pelvic floor throughout this whole process is extremely important. Basically, you're going to keep it lifted the whole time to various degrees. On inhale, you'll have less of a lift. On exhale, you're going to further lift it. And what I mean by that is lifting or contracting. The perineum is a little difficult to contract specifically, so most of the time you focus on the anus. The anus is generally easier for us to feel. Also, the muscles around the base of the penis or the vagina or whatever you're working with, those muscles are also a little bit easier too. So again, you're going to contract whatever you can along your pelvic floor. On inhale, through the third eye point, bring your awareness down to your navel, then lift up the pelvic floor, directing your awareness to the space just below the navel. So once you've done this, you want to go ahead and exhale and continue to lift up the pelvic floor. And so something else to keep in mind is your alignment. You want to feel comfortable and seated over your sit bones. I like to tip my pelvis, so I'm pushing my genitals, my perineum down into the floor. And there's something called neck lock. So neck lock is tucking the chin, pulling it back, neck goes straight. So I've got neck lock pulled, I'm contracted, I've inhaled down to the navel point, lifting the perineum, exhaling. So what you can do now is you can pull up under the ribs. Release, inhale. So now what I did to pull up under the ribs, this is called diaphragm lock. Diaphragm lock, you pull, how do I say this? You have to block off your glottis or create a seal on the inside of the throat. And then what you're doing is you're creating the sensation as if you're inhaling, even though no air is actually coming in. So what you're doing is you're actually creating a suction. And the suction is lifting the diaphragm, lifting the abdominals up under the ribs. So again, it's a suction. And also you're kind of pulling in as well. So it's both the suction as well as the muscular contraction and the lift up underneath the ribs. So I always do this after I've breathed and inhaled from the third eye down to the navel. And now what I recommend you do is you do the third eye to the navel several times. So you're inhaling, bringing the awareness down the navel, lifting the perineum, directing the awareness at the navel, exhaling, and then just continually repeating this process until you feel like your awareness is centered down below the navel. And then you want to pull diaphragm lock, neck lock, and essentially, and once again, your pelvic floor is also lifted. So you have pelvic floor lifted, that is called mula bandha or root lock, diaphragm lock, lifted, neck lock. And what we're pulling all this together is called Mahabandha, or the great lock. So I always do this at the beginning of my breath practice, and then I do it also towards the end of the practice. Now the second part of this practice, after you have your awareness centered around your navel, the breathing is going to shift. You're going to inhale, and you're going to breathe into your inner thighs. So close to the groin, to the inner thighs. You're going to breathe into the inner thighs on inhale. And again, you want to keep a slight lift on your pelvic floor. When you exhale, you want to lift even more up on your pelvic floor. And I call it like the eternal exhale. You want to continue to exhale until no more air goes out. Once all the air is out, you'll have a nice firm contraction. So, and then you want to relax the contractions. Once again, inhale into your thighs, keeping the pelvic floor very, very gently lifted on inhale. Exhale, further cinching it up, further contracting the anus, the perineum, the genitals, the belt line. So, once again, do this for several breaths. After the several breaths, what I suggest is to do some breath of fire now. So breath of fire has many purposes, but primarily, as I like to see breath of fire, is it's about saturating with oxygen. So breath of fire is done from your navel. So it's from the belt line. So when I pull in, air goes out. When I relax, air comes in. So it's So now the beauty of breath of fire is that it's non-diaphragmic. I'm not inhaling nor exhaling, I'm not making any obvious attempts to inhale or exhale. The air is simply being driven by the muscular contractions happening at the belt line. Once again, when doing breath of fire, I suggest keeping a very light lift of your pelvic floor. And so you want to do breath of fire, think about 45 seconds to a minute. And again, we're going to saturate with oxygen here. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate breath of fire. So again, you want to pull up tall. Go ahead, press your perineal area down, genital area down, chin slightly tucked. Inhale a deep breath. Exhale completely. Inhale half breath. And begin breath of fire. Again, keeping a lift on your pelvic floor. Now I just did like 10-15 seconds there. Now to finish, you inhale, retain the breath. You want to pull your spine up as much as possible. Keep the lift up the pelvic floor. You want to roll your eyes up, tongue at the roof of the mouth. And then you want to exhale. Continue lifting the pelvic floor. Tongue remains at the roof of the mouth. Eyes rolled up towards the back of the head, the crown area. And once again, when all the air is out, diaphragm lock. Then you want to relax everything. Once again, inhaling through the third eye, bring the awareness back down to the navel point. Retain the breath briefly, lifting the pelvic floor, directing the awareness back to the navel, and then exhale. So now that's the breath progression of this exercise. Usually what I suggest you do afterwards is, I like to tune into the energy between my hands. It kind of brings the energy back up to my hands, back to the extremities. So oftentimes what I'll do is I'll rub my hands, and you create this chi ball kind of experience. So what I'm doing here is I'm moving my hands in and out. You can move it back and forth. And what you do is you're trying to sense for some sort of sensation between the hands. It could feel like push or a pull. It could feel like heat or a tingle, whatever it may be. You want to find that ball. And you just want to, again, stay with that ball, close your eyes, and breathe long and deep. Really allowing everything to expand out, because all those contractions you just did, they're basically, I don't know how to say this. Well, I do know how to say this. Stretching doesn't relieve muscle tension. Contracting through a full range of motion relieves muscle tension. What that means is, if I'm interested in, let's say, relieving tension in my bicep, which I don't really, but let's say I do, I contract it fully, then I lengthen it fully. It requires a full contraction before you lengthen. So again, you contract it fully, then you lengthen. And that's how you properly stretch something. So essentially what we did with all the breathing is the core muscles, the deep muscles of the abdomen, pelvic floor, as well as several other muscle groups. When we were doing the inhales and the exhales and all this business, essentially the exhale, particularly the eternal exhale that we did the first part of this exercise, that cinches in all those muscles. And what it's also doing is it's squeezing up the energy, but more so and more practically, it's providing those muscles with that contraction so that you can then relieve tension, so that you can then breathe deeply. So now the breathing portion here, you can just continue, like I said, long, deep breathing, feeling and sensing that chi ball. You can do the breathing through the third eye down to the navel. You can breathe into your inner thighs, whatever it may be. The whole point here is to, again, bringing your awareness, your concentration to some sort of physical focal point. And it really doesn't matter where exactly you're breathing into. However, I do suggest third eye point down to navel, or continuing to breathe into your inner thighs. Let's see. I think that's all I want to kind of talk about in terms of the breathing portion of this exercise. Next, I'm going to show you the physical portion, or the exercises. Again, this whole process that I just showed you at the beginning there, I recommend you kind of divide this up. And again, take your time, be patient about it. There's no rush with this at all. And just keep in mind that this requires, first and foremost, you need to abstain from ejaculation. So, all right. So now the physical exercises. First physical exercise we're going to do is the spine flex. This is from the Kundalini Yoga system. So you're going to hook in, your hands are on the knees. So the motion, I suggest keeping all the breathing through the nose. But the motion is inhale as you come forward. So I'm actually drawing my shoulder blades together and slightly down. And again, my chin stays tucked. In other words, your head is not doing this during this exercise. You want to keep the chin slightly tucked during it. So it's inhaling forward, exhaling back. So when I go back, what I do is I'm tucking my tailbone under. So it's inhaling forward, pushing perineum, genitals down, chin is tucked, exhaling and back. And then you want to inhale, lift up, pull up tall, lift the perineum, direct the energy towards your navel, exhale, and pull Mula Bandha or root lock, which is, again, the eternal exhale, is you want to exhale every last bit of air out while cinching all the muscles along the pelvic floor. Now, don't do this so intensely that you burst a blood vessel or something. Again, you just want to continue to contract your pelvic floor until all the air is out. And if you want, you can add diaphragm lock, neck lock, once again, another Mahabandha. And then you inhale, exhale, and you relax for about 30 seconds. So next exercise we're going to do is a spine twist. So fingertips in front, elbows up high, thumbs in back. So the motion is, first off, you want to make sure you're seated upright, you're balanced over your pelvic floor, rather the sit bones. And the motion is inhaling as you twist left, exhaling as you twist right, and I suggest keeping your eyes closed and your awareness at the brow point. So it's so once again, you want to do this. I also should say that the spine flex at the beginning, you want to do that for 1 to 3 minutes. Spine twist we just did now, 1 to 3 minutes. Once again, when you're doing this spine twist, it helps to keep a very light lift along the pelvic floor. So keeping a light lift on the pelvic floor while you're doing that. Now, once you come back to center, you want to inhale through both nostrils. Once again, inhaling through the third eye point, bringing the awareness down to the navel, lifting up the pelvic floor, directing the energy at the navel. And then when you're ready to exhale, you do the eternal exhale, cinching and contracting the pelvic floor additionally. And once you feel like all the air is out, if you choose, you can do another Mahabandha. And then you inhale. Well, first you want to relax everything. Inhale. And exhale, arms down. You want to relax 30 seconds or so. All right, so the next exercise is a forward fold. So This is like every man's nemesis. Let's see if you can see me okay. All right, so forward fold. What I usually do is I try to do this first under my own power, my own strength. But I suggest you press the insides of your feet together, so you're firmly together. You want to angle your toes towards you. I like to interlace my fingers like so. Inhale, deep breath. Pull in the belt line, in and slightly up. Once you have a nice firm pull, keeping the breath retained, you want to gradually, slowly continue pulling in the belt line and slowly bowing forward. Now, once you get to a certain point where as far as you can go with the air retained, you want to exhale all the air out. So once you get to the furthest point that you can bow, I usually use 2 fingers and my thumb, and I hook the big toes. I hook those big toes, press the thumbs into the tips of the big toes, and I pull it back towards my head. Again, you want to keep the feet and hips rotated inward, so there's a pressure on the inside part of the foot. So once you're in this position, you want to, again, you're going to get further lengthening is as you're lifting your pelvic floor. So when you inhale, you want to keep a slight lift on the pelvic floor, and on exhale, you want to more firmly pull it up, because that'll allow you to lengthen further. So pulling up on the pelvic floor. And once you get further and further, tuck the chin. And so you want to, once you get down to the furthest extent, you want to hold that for 1 to 3 minutes. And again, keep in mind that it's the lift on your pelvic floor, the pull in of the belt line, that's what's going to progress you forward. Not some sort of, core abdominal strength isn't going to do it. It's all on the pelvic floor. So that's the forward fold. So after you do forward fold, once again, you want to relax, 30 seconds or so, or more if you wish. Again, be cognizant to pay attention to your body while you're doing these practices. The body is going to communicate precisely what it needs. So after you do the forward fold, what I suggest you do then is a lunge stretch. It can be very simple. Lunge stretch. So how I do a lunge stretch. So you want to have your glutes, your backside contracted, trailing leg, front leg. Weight is towards the front heel. And so you just want to, again, continue to contract your glute forward. The breathing is inhaling, lifting the pelvic floor, exhaling, lifting up on the pelvic floor. All right, so something I didn't mention during the lunge demonstration, which is what to do with your arms, partially because I had to hold the camera. So once you're in that lunge, you got your trailing leg, you got your lead leg, you got your glute contracted. Then what you want to do is you want to interlace your fingers, stretch those, pressing those palms up towards the ceiling. So now it'll help lengthen and open up the front side of the body. And again, just keep in mind with the lunge stretch, you got to do both sides. After the lunge stretch, what we're going to do is we're going to progress now into a plow in a shoulder stand. So the plow and the shoulder stand, this is going to be really interesting doing this with a mic. But so you want to kind of come down to lying. And so what I suggest you do first is to do a few leg lifts. Now to do leg lifts, I usually inhale, press my lower back down, and again I've got my toes, my big toes pressed together. and allows me to lift up. So you can do this with the hands here or back over the head. We're going to do back over the head for now. So get your arms back over the head, fingers spread wide, inhaling up, and then you want to lower it back down. Let's inhale, exhale down. So you do this a few times, and then you want to progress into a plow, exhaling all the air out. And so it's long, deep breathing. And once again, it helps to have that pelvic floor activated. So keeping a light lift on the pelvic floor, inhaling, exhaling, continuing to contract the pelvic floor. And you want to stay in this position for, maybe a minute or two. Then what you're going to do is you're going to lower your arms, bring your hands to your lower back, and press up into a shoulder stand. Once again, my toes are pressed together. I'm lengthened upward. All the weight here is not on my back. It's on my shoulders and my arms. It's not on my neck. And so what I'm doing here now to come out of the position is you lower the legs first, exhaling, then inhale and roll right back down. Bend the knees. Come and tuck up into a ball briefly. Exhaling all the air out. Inhale. Relax your pelvic floor. Relax the lower back. Relax your tailbone. Then lift up the perineum, pelvic floor. Exhale. Then inhale. Roll it back down. And lengthen the legs. And then you want to relax in your back. Think about a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, but definitely more than a minute. So that's the plow into shoulder stand sequence. And then finally, I think the last thing that I recommend everyone to do is kind of a hip tip. So what you'll do is you'll come onto your back once again. Knees are bent. And simply just rotating the hips. Arms are out like a T. And so you can kind of do, 30, 40 seconds each side. Again, just rotating the hips. You can use one hand on the same side arm, rather, and press down. But again, you want to make sure you're breathing. Inhaling fully, exhaling completely. And then pivoting back to center. Extending the legs. Arms out to the side, palms up, legs parted. And go into a deep relaxation. All right. So, after the deep relaxation, it's recommended you do some meditation. So the meditation, you could just do open awareness. Again, the function of meditation is allowing. Some people talk about meditation. There are these terms of like, letting go of this and letting go of that, and all these different terms. No, this is not about letting go. This is not about repressing. This is not about expressing. Meditation, in its most pure sense, is simply allowing everything to rise. The most horrific shit could rise to the surface, and take my word for it, some of us experience some very bizarre things in meditation, as I do. You have to allow it. Scary things come to the surface. You have to allow it. And again, it's all vitally important that you allow everything to rise to the surface. So with all that said, hopefully you enjoyed this video, and like I said, I recommend you do that whole progression daily. That way you're going to get the most out of it. And again, particularly if you're planning on abstaining from ejaculation for a long period of time, and particularly if your interest in abstaining from ejaculation and developing and cultivating sexual energy particularly if your interest is about cultivating multiple orgasms, or you want to contact and connect to other woo-woo realities and visual experiences and things of that nature, then you're going to have to do these kinds of practices because it helps distribute that flow of energy. So with all that said, thank you very much. Appreciate you watching the video.